From the Central Wisconsin ALS group. We're actually from Auburndale. I don't know, does anybody know where Auburndale is? Just kind of curious.
Kind of,
Or up by Stevens Point up that area? No.
It is.
Kind of, yeah, it's between Stevens Point and Marshfield.
Oh, okay.
We live north of the village, about 3 miles.
Okay.
Little history about myself here. I was diagnosed in September of 2019,
Wow.
and it started for me in my hands. It worked its way up my arms. Now it's working its way down into my legs. You know, this affects different people differently. Strangely enough, my voice and my ability to swallow has not been really affected yet too bad. So although my voice certainly is weaker because my diaphragm muscles are weak, so it's hard for me to push out enough air through my vocal cords. So as far as this voice banking and stuff, and Kat knows,
You can't hear, can you?
Kat knows what kind of a blockhead I am. And so I was not real keen on the idea of recording my voice. But the more it was brought up at our meetings, the more Katrine was convinced that I need to do that. So basically, I agreed to do it. I don't know, was that about a year ago, Kat?
I was gonna say about a year. Mhm.
So what they did, they sent me a little recorder, and I could record a lot of my own one-liners and whatever. I have them separated into like responses or greetings or paulisms or help needed or whatever. So honestly, it went pretty easy, that part of it. Then as far as using a synthesized voice, there was a what was it, a website or something that I had to recite different phrases and whatnot. And from there, you know, with the software and whatnot, they can, I could type out a sentence and it would repeat it in my voice, but it would still be a synthesized voice. So there's that part of it. But I also can respond or say things in my recorded voice as well. So that's kind of a nice thing. So it doesn't sound quite so robotic for general responses like yes, no, thank you, whatever. As far as getting it all set up, there were some issues with the tablet that we were given, but overall, this Tobii, and that's another thing, Kat, is that pronounced Tobii Dynavox or Tobii I Dynavox?
Tobii Dynavox.
It's Tobii.
Mhm.
Okay. There's 2 I's in there, so I was wondering.
Yeah, no, great question.
So anyway, my observations now is that I've got it all set up and I'm using the eye gaze part of it. So my fingers are just about useless. So I have a real hard time typing. I have to use 2 hands to use a mouse. So I'm still able to get online, you know, cruise the internet, whatever, write emails, but I can do that all with my eyes. And it's really pretty amazing technology. The one thing I will say about it, if there's any chance that you can get it set up before you need it and way before you need it, it's just going to be a lot easier than to try to get used to it after you need it. So if you're thinking about it at all, do yourself a favor and get it done. Then when you do have it done, it's a real exercise in patience also, because you just can't, as good as you can get, you're still not as quick as typing on a keyboard or clicking with a mouse or whatever. But it's pretty darn good. It really is.
I agree with that. And I think that's something that we've talked about a little bit with some of our ALS Association loaner devices. So we do have some eye gaze devices available through our loan program, which allows you to be able to try it out, use it before you may need it. Because insurance requirements can be a little bit trickier. They require you meet certain speech kind of requirements before they'll pay for one. And at that point, like Paul said, it can be hard to really to get to know how to use it when you're already learning how to use other pieces of it. So we are always happy to send out a loaner device for you to try out, for you to use, whatever kind of works best. But thanks for saying that, Paul. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yes, and if there's any problems, of course, get a hold of Kat or Christy or Kathleen or any of those. I always give those ladies attagirls every month because they've just been fantastic to work with. So
we try. But Paul's being very humble. He unfortunately has received one from us that has had quite a few issues, but he has been very resilient in kind of fixing some of the issues that have come up with it. But usually they shouldn't have quite as many issues that Paul has encountered. So, but I appreciate you sharing that. I think, did you encounter any other barriers kind of besides some of that, like transferring the messages on or any issues with the eye gaze itself?
I did not, but if somebody did have problems, again, just get a hold of Kat and she'll put you on a straight and narrow path. She will. She's tough. She's tough. Don't let that little petite little personality fool you.
True. When I have to be mean, I will. Katrine, what about you? Did you have, so I know Paul kind of said at the beginning, like he felt like he started to consider more about voice and message banking because you kind of were interested. What did it mean to you for him to do kind of that voice preservation piece?
Well, it means a lot. I have a sister who can't communicate and she is in assisted living and it's very, very difficult. We wish there was some way that we could know exactly if she's in pain even, and things. So I really encouraged Paul, since he still has his voice. And of course, my sister is suffering from something totally different than ALS, although it's Parkinson's, it is a neurological disease. But so I really encouraged him because I want to know if he's in pain or if he needs something, and if he can, use his eyes, yet he'll be able to communicate that. So I really wanted him to do that. But aside from that too, he does have a lot of Paul-isms, like he said, that many people enjoy hearing him say and to tease him with and all those things. So many people were encouraging him to do this. And so now we have those and we'll be able to hear him in his voice, which will be, you know, very nice if in fact his voice is ever taken from him. So, like he said, and as you can tell, his voice is pretty strong. What you probably can't tell from there is, but he did mention he has to force his voice quite hard because his diaphragm is getting so weak. And so his voice sometimes will be a lot quieter. But as far as the disease so far, it doesn't appear to be affecting his voice and his throat at this point. But as we all know, that can change overnight, and we just take it day by day.
Paul, can you explain a little bit more about what your Paulisms are? Like what you and how you decided what to record, maybe those pieces.
Well, I worked in heavy industry most of my life. I was a pipe fitter in a paper mill for a lot of years, and then I finished out my working career in the oil field as a directional driller. So you meet all sorts of people from all over the world. And those are blue collar jobs. So they all sorts of blue collar one-liners that come up. And for whatever reason, I remember a lot of those. And so those are a lot of the silly, nonsensical things that I would record because they're humorous. And I didn't make any of that nonsense up. I'm just repeating. I'm sure some of these things have been said for thousands of years in different languages. It's just that, you know, they kind of stick with me.
Yeah.
I don't care to repeat any of them here because mixed company. So I don't know any of you well enough to know if I should say some of this stuff or not. But anyway.
But if you need some examples, contact him privately.
Well, they're not all like that.
Well, no, they're not all bad, but
No.
some of them you wouldn't want to say around your grandkids.
Yeah.
Let's just put it that way.
Well, thank you,
The
Paul.
grandkids had probably heard worse and say worse. But you
Right.
still
Well,
can't
you're
say
probably
it.
right.
Yep.
I'm that way with my kids.
Yeah.
Like they might have to tell me what this one really means, but I can't say it in front of them.
The one thing I wanted to add with all of this stuff, whether you're using the voice banking or the eye gaze or both, is be patient with yourself. Just be patient. And then once you get it set up, even if you don't necessarily need it, try to use it every day for just a few minutes so that your eyes naturally, they just from using it, they know where to look so that it speeds things up. And you know, you just get more accustomed to it. The next thing would be for any of the caregivers who may have to wait for a response, they also have to have a little extra patience because the answer doesn't come quite as quick as a normal conversation. So patience is a big deal,
Mhm.
but it does work and it's pretty neat, really is.
Well, thank you, Paul. I appreciate you sharing your thoughts and kind of why you chose to do voice preservation and kind of get a head start on eye gaze and all of those pieces. I think that's helpful.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna flip us to a different side of the coin here, and Ron, I'm gonna go with you. Kind of, I know you haven't done voice preservation. Kind of, what have your thoughts been around that, and why you've chosen not to do it, and those pieces?
No, I have not done it. A little bit of my background. I was diagnosed in October of 2019. You know, when you're diagnosed, they give you a time frame that you're not going to be here anymore. And I'm in that window, but I'm still here. So I looked at doing the voice stuff a couple years ago and kind of examined it and chose not to do it. Part of it is denial that I'm never going to have a problem. And part of it is the belief that I'm going to get better. And I don't want to give that up. At this point, I'm going in a little different direction. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the new Apple Vision Pro. Have you seen that at all? Basically goggles to
Oh.
be able to see, like your whole keyboard and stuff on it.
Mhm.
But within that, some of the demonstrations I've seen on TV, you can create your own persona. So basically, I mean, they showed one lady, she had set hers up, and it basically looked like her and it sounded like her. I mean, the advancement of chip technology and AI is going to make a lot of things that we can't even dream of right now ourselves available to us. And so, maybe we'll get to singularity. I'll wait for that.
Yeah. Well, and Ron, I like that you brought up the idea of some of those, like the advancement in technology and what that's done. I think it has made a really big difference. I think when people think about using kind of a communication device or something like that, people often will envision Stephen Hawking and will hear his voice. He used a very early version of kind of a voice. And so oftentimes people might associate it with something like that. So voices have gotten so much better because the technology has gotten better at mimicking human voice and mimicking some of those changes. And so, I think I like that you shared that perspective on the idea too of not wanting to give up that hope. I think that is a really big piece of preserving something like your voice, and I really appreciate you sharing that.
Couple other things. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I lost my ability to use a keyboard a long time ago. And so I got set up with the Dragon software. So I do most of my stuff. If I want to do an email or stuff, I dictate. And so I've got some records in there, basis for stuff within those files that would cover my voice and things that I say. Paul, you said you had problems with the mouse, so I'm going to try to hold something up, and I don't know if you guys can see it. See if I can get it up that high. Can you see it at all?
No.
Come here for a second. Can you come also in front of the camera for me? Also in the front of the camera. Oh, in front of the,
Oh, now where's the camera?
on top of the screen.
Up a little bit more, Leola.
Okay, sure.
Go back on. It's an air mouse. So basically it's got a trigger. Your index and then your thumb can, has the ball move around. So I got this about 6 months ago and I actually got two of them because I got one for both computers. I just couldn't handle the mouse on the table anymore.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Something like that.
And there are two, and Ron, I don't know if you've ever tried any of these, but I actually wonder. I know I have one somewhere in my office. There are head mice too. Like the Glass House is a really popular one that we recommend. You can wear it. The older versions are attached to like a glasses kind of like thing, but you can also attach it to like a hat or something like that. And basically by moving your head, that acts as the control for the mouse. And then you have a switch that you can place different places. Sometimes people use like a bite switch as the click, but you could also do, like a light touch with your finger, or And so it's all about kind of what's going to be, yeah, the best fit for you. And I love that you've tried some of that.
Well, I kind of went with this because my thumbs still work and I try to keep my thumbs working because I need them for the Xbox controller.
Mhm.
Sure.
Got to have the important things, Ron.
So Ron, what do you call that device?
An air mouse.
Air mouse, okay.
I can send the information to you, Kat, and you can
Yeah.
share it.
I would love that. I always love learning about. I think that's one of the things too, because technology is constantly changing. I feel like I'm always learning too from all of you about what kind of is available and what has been helpful for people. So thanks for sharing that, Ron. I hadn't seen that before. Was there anything else that you wanted to add about kind of voice and message banking?
Not directly, but as a side note, I don't know if anybody's followed the Neuralink project from Elon Musk.
Little bit, yeah.
They just completed their first implant. And I haven't followed up to see what the person's status is, but I mean, if they're able to get that to work, it might address a lot of the issues that people have with like their voice or with their hands. I mean, it always comes down to me as an issue as to, you know, the issue with ALS is a failure of electronic communication from your brain to your muscle. Is
Yeah,
that
it is.
in your brain or is it down closer to your muscle? So if it's in your brain, the Neuralink would work, but if it's not getting the electronic impulse down through your system, it's not going to matter because all the Neuralink is doing electronic stimulation of an area in the brain.
Yeah. And so if people haven't seen that yet, that is basically an implantable device. They're working on different, what they call like BCI, brain computer interface, where basically by having an implant, and they've done it in other ways in the past too, like with a wearable electrode cap and things like that. But that just by thinking about moving a muscle, even if you're not moving it, that acts as a way for you to access things like a computer or a tablet or things like that. In my experience, I don't know where my most recent experience with brain computer interface is that the technology hadn't quite been there yet in terms of wanting to be able to control like a mouse, but I think that they've come a long way in like the last couple of years. And so it'll definitely be interesting to continue to follow that. The Neuralink, and then there's another company, Synchron, who is also developing one that's more of like a mesh implant too. So yeah, that's definitely something we could look at to explore more deeply in the future if people are interested. All right. Brian, I'm looking at you.
I'm looking back at you. All right, everybody. So I didn't and haven't yet done any voice banking. Now, there are a few reasons for this. I've got to look it up again because I always forget. I was diagnosed back in, I think, 07 or 08. It's been a while. And if in telling a guy in his early 40s he suddenly better start recording his voice because it may not be around for long, was a little I was a little taken aback by that. It took a while to process. It also became evident fairly early that as the disease progressed, my voice wasn't going to be the thing affected. Like I haven't had many problems with eating and swallowing, even though I've had to become a lot more careful with things like that. And the biggest problems I've run into is not being able to force enough air through my lungs to talk very well. Out of my lungs, I should add, not through them, but you get the idea. And there are other related issues that have to do with swallowing, throat clearing and stuff like that. And another big deal was that I knew the technology was going to be changing fast, but 15 years ago, it was a lot different than it is now. It was really artificial, synthetic voices and things like that. So while I would certainly encourage anybody facing issues to look into doing it, because like with any intervention or anything you're going to do with ALS, it's good to at least have started it and be practiced in it before you need it. I mean, this is true certainly with voice issues as well as anything else. Because before you realize you need it, or you're going to need it before you realize it. So that's kind of where I came from with it.
Mhm.
Also, at the time, it wasn't presented very clearly. People didn't make a very clear presentation about, this is what voice banking is like. This is all you have to do. So,
Well, and I think, Brian, one of the pieces you bring up is really true too, is how much it's changed in,
yes.
15 years. I think, even when I first started about 10 years ago, in the voice preservation area, it was you record 1,600 sentences. You have to do it in a soundproof booth with a speech language pathologist, and it's going to take hours and days and all of this piece.
Yeah.
Now, you can do it from the comfort of your home. You can really do it pretty typically with your laptop microphone, and you can do it in about 20 minutes. You record 50 sentences and you're done. And so it is definitely, there's been a big change, and there's been a very big change too in how people talk about it. But I think too, some of that in, at least in the speech field, some people are very familiar with the old way, and so don't know all the updates that have happened too. And so I think there's definitely a learning curve for a lot of people.
Yes.
But I appreciate you sharing, and I'm gonna ask you a little bit more, a little
Go
bit
right
about
ahead.
the piece of that initial, you're telling me I'm gonna lose my voice, and how do I process that? Talk to me a little bit more about that emotional barrier to some of that.
A lot of the emotional barrier, I think, also came with people kept telling me it was a good idea to start recording personal messages for people, because I won't be around to tell them, which, I mean, there was certainly a real likelihood that I wouldn't be around to tell them. But at 42 or 43, I was more in the middle of life than at a point where I was ready to start summing anything up. In a sense, it was sort of like, okay, one more time. Think about all the people you really want to say goodbye to. That sort of thing. And what I guess you would think of as precisely, almost precisely the middle of life, let's say, that was kind of hard to do. Talk about, needed to get my head wrapped around that. Well, that was part of what was going on, getting my head wrapped around that idea. So as soon as we're done, I'm going to start researching what I need specifically and investing in holders for all my various devices so that this is going to be much simpler.
Well, feel free to reach out to me too, Brian. We have stuff, so if you need
this used to be also sort of a semi-field of expertise for me. I feel like I should be able to use my expertise. A while back, I often do this thing where I'll say something kind of flippant, and people do that. They often regret it. But I sometimes do it, and I get a little head scratcher out of it I've got to think about for a while. And I said to someone, mostly myself, but I said it out loud. So this is not the time of life for learning new skills, but for using the ones I've got already a little better. Then I realized, I do have a lot of oddly picked up skills when you put them together. One is I should be able to figure out how to hold this iPhone and this iPad in place pretty easy.
I believe in you, Brian.
I know exactly, well, I bought and sold photographic equipment for about 20 years. So I know how to like prop up and hold devices steady. So should be able to get this figured out.
You know, I say too that like I work with technology all day and I still don't, there are things that I just, I'm like, I should be able to know the answer to this, but I don't.
Yeah.
When you're applying it to your own life, it's different.
Yeah. It's also like I should be able to find this out, but I'm going to complain to my kids instead.
Yeah. That's right.
And they're going to go, Dad, just turn it off and turn it back on.
Yep, oh, yeah.
I mean, I know that's the answer, but I just have to cry out loud and say it.
Oh, yeah.
Sometimes a little bad language goes a long way.
Yeah. Well, I encourage the children not to use bad language, but to find other very creative ways to say it.
Mhm.
Love it. So good.
There's a rending of garments and a gnashing of teeth, people crying out in pain. No, Dad, just turn it off. Okay. See, I don't have individual lines. I just try to pull out a little story whenever I can, even if I have to make it up.
Love it. Well, thank
So
you.
I just determined not to shut up, and now people wish I would just record my voice and push a little button sometimes just to keep things quiet. When I couldn't walk and talk at the same time anymore, I think people were kind of relieved. I used to do a fair amount of public speaking too, but I don't do that anymore. Just can't keep up.
And that. Well, thank you, Brian. I appreciate you sharing that, and definitely thinking about some of those like the emotional piece and the way that things are presented too. I think is really important.
Yeah.
And I appreciate that feedback too, just as a way to, I don't know, think about what that means for different people. So I want to share too from Greg Lampe kind of some of the thoughts he gave me on his voice and message banking journey. Again, he's doing his clinical trial, so couldn't join us today, but he wanted to share. And then I also asked Scott to share some of his thoughts too. But if you, Scott, can you just give me a thumbs up when you're ready?
I lost my voice a year ago. I read 50 sentences and they created my voice. I have it on this iPad, my phone, and my laptop. Can't help me with this.
Yep. And so Scott's obviously using the voice that kind of he created too. And I think that was one of the first things that we did together, I think, Scott, was going through some of that piece. So I know that if it's all right, I think for you, part of it too was being able to kind of check it off, like it's something I can do and accomplish and it's done. And so that was a big piece too for help them with. So feel free to keep typing if you want. Scott, I'm going to read Greg's thoughts too on voice preservation. And then I kind of want to open up because I know other people have done it or other people are considering. And so I want to open it after that. But so for Greg, he said that I chose to complete voice and message banking because if in the event of my voice and need to use a device, I want the voice friends and families to hear to be my own voice and not a computer generated one. Each person's voice is unique. People around us identify us in part by our voice. Having my voice recorded is my way of preserving my identity. Additionally, perhaps people will find it comforting to hear my voice coming out of a machine rather than a computer generated one. He said he felt like the process was fairly easy, that once he understood how to advance through the phrases, he was able to do the process really quickly. And he was able to record all his phrases over a 2-day period. And what he liked is that it was very forgiving. So if he didn't like a way that he read a word or phrase, that he could record it again. And then he created a list of approximately 75 phrases that he recorded using technology and included statements that are unique to him. For example, telling my wife that I love her, calling and praising my dog, telling each of my daughters and son-in-laws and grandchildren that I love them. And the list also included small phrases like, tell me more about that, or what happened next, or that's really interesting. All in all, I really enjoyed the process. I find comfort in knowing that my voice and messages have been recorded and will be ready for me when I should need them or use them. But he said too, it was also hard to record personal phrases that shared my love for others. I had to pause the recording process to collect my emotions. Sometimes I was so choked up, I had trouble recording the phrase. When this happened, I tried again and again until I could say the phrase and still convey the emotion behind it. I easily moved through standard phrases, but it was the personal list of phrases where I encountered the most difficulties. The voice and message banking process brought home to me that I could possibly lose my voice in the future, and I found myself grieving that possible loss during the process. This caused me to pause and reflect on my ALS and how the disease could steal away my voice. I asked myself, what would it be like for me and for the people I love and care about for me not to have my voice? My response to this question was to continue to record the messages I most need to communicate to my family and friends, and it motivated me to complete the process. So again, I think he brought up, similar to you, Brian, some of that emotional piece and like how he encountered that and what kind of that meant for him too. So